Hello, and welcome to Into the Night, a Five Nights at Freddy's podcast. I am your host, Nick, and thank you for listening. On today's episode, we will be looking into one of the most complex and debated entries in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. A game in which the plot is so deep, convoluted, and confusing that it warps and wraps around itself like a Mobius strip inside a Klein bottle. A story in which the intentions of the series' creator, Scott Cawthon, is still debated to this day. A narrative that bounces between the line of artistic freedom of expression and interpretation with convolution. Five Nights at Freddy's 4, subtitled The Final Chapter before that was retroactively changed before release, is one of the most infamous chapters of the franchise. I'm in no way over-exaggerating that just by bringing up this game, let alone making a whole episode out of it, is entering contested water of headcanons and unconfirmed theories that people hold as biblical truth, to say the least. But, due to the importance that this game brings in subsequent entries, and the plot hooks that are present within it, it is necessary that we dissect the events within if we are to fully appreciate and comprehend the overall story. For this reason, I'll be going over the game in two parts. Today's episode, we'll be looking at the surface level plot and what the story presents as a basis. Then in the next episode, we will dive into theories and interpretations of the game's events and what were those events and Scott Cawthon trying to communicate. This is the beginning of an arc in Scott Cawthon's dark world. An arc that transformed the narrative of Five Nights at Freddy's. From a childhood ghost story into a story of shattered individuals who attempt to put themselves back together. The story of a broken family which slowly withers and decays due to the sins of the father, whose crimes are paid for by his own children's blood. Children who each take on elements of that corrupted father and are unknowingly part of a story much larger than they realize. This is episode 4. Tomorrow is another day. While we normally centralize our story within the night shift of a Fazbear entertainment location, our perspective of events focus on the viewpoint of a security guard, this time around our viewpoint is a bit different. Our story begins with a child, no less than 10 years of age, locked in his room. The ambience is nothing more than a long drone with the occasional deep laugh or ethereal chuckle. The boy has dark brown curly hair and wears a black shirt with gray stripes. Tears stream down the young boy's face. Locked in his room with nothing but himself and a few plush creatures he keeps in the corner of his room. These plushies are the Fazbear Ensemble, complete with Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie the Bunny, Chica the Chicken, and a severely damaged Foxy the Pirate who looks to have had a run-in with Robespierre in his guillotine. The plush's head completely torn from its body. On his bed sits a fifth plush doll, a yellow bear with purple accessories, namely a top hat and bow tie, along with 2 black buttons on his stomach. He has a simplistic, if not uncanny, smile plastered widely on his face, and 2 black eyes with white, disturbing pupils. Disturbing not from the contrast of color or design of the pillow, but from the fact that the pupils followed the boy wherever he wandered in his room. It even talked to the boy, communicating and almost attempting to console the young child, calm him down and reassure him of himself and the situation, telling him things such as,
"What did he do this time? He locked you in your room. Don't be scared. I am here with you."
Now, unfortunately for the boy, his guardian angel doesn't look to actually be alive. More than likely, this is just a coping mechanism for the young child, as he does hold a special place in his heart for stuffed animals, even going so far as to claim them as his friends. The boy seems to be utterly alone without anyone close to him he can trust, to love, to be loved. The door to his bedroom is locked shut, and no matter how much he pounds on the door wishing to be let out of his bedroom confinement, nobody came. Once he realizes this, the crying child meekly drops on the floor, curls into a ball, and cries himself to sleep. With his only companion, real or unreal, uttering the reassuring words,
Tomorrow is another day.
5 days until the party.
Our scene makes a drastic and contrasting shift to the point of view of a small child. It's the middle of the night, inside a bedroom, similar to the one we saw previously, but with a few noticeable differences. For one, the room is starkly bigger, so big that it has 2 doors on each side of the room, instead of the, standard one. Odd, since they both lead to separate hallways. The golden Freddy plush that was on the crying child's bed, which used to be a supernatural source of safety, is not present in this room, instead being replaced with a standard brown Freddy Fazbear, devoid of any personality or sentience. None of the other plush mascots are around, and instead replaced with several other unusual toys, reminiscent of the old standard security offices of the Fazbear brand locations, including a plastic purple fan on his tall dresser, and a similar purple-colored telephone on wheels, complete with a pair of cartoon eyes and a smile. Small oddities decorate the room, including cutout stars on his walls, a small purple robot, and a psychedelic-colored caterpillar. Pictures of past memories in the form of family photos echo the kid's drawing in the night guard's office, remnants of joy from childhood memories, better and happier times that one wishes they could revisit in a time of high stress or anxiety. Darkness surrounds the boy from all angles, with the only source of light originating from the flashlight in his hand. It only provides him with limited visibility, but without it, he would be stranded in a sea of black. The only sign of life being the occasional chime of a grandfather clock, the sound of the outside world sneaking its way into the house, and the other unrecognizable noises emitting from the shadows. It doesn't take long for the child to put a face to those supernatural noises, as a wild, high-pitched static noise whirls behind him. He turns around, aiming his torch at the sound, and spots 3 more brown bears on his bed. Although they are drastically distinct from his cute friend on the bed, these bears are tattered, worn down. Any semblance of softness and cotton has been replaced with rough edges and cold hard steel, with a visible metallic endoskeleton underneath the torn leather. As they remain the epicenter of light emitted from the child's flashlight, they begin to viciously and rapidly twitch before disappearing underneath the bed in a paranormal manner, zipping off the side from a speed of stationary to imperceptible to the human eye, and maneuvering as if they are weightless. These little gremlins are called Freddles, and there are 3 of them. If all 3 somehow get atop the bed, they will eventually summon their master of sorts, a giant, tattered, and beaten Freddy Fazbear whose damaged and preternatural appearance are exaggerated to an extensive degree, to the point that his waist is completely torn, revealing the wires and robotic joints underneath. At the end of the hallway lingers 2 more threats, Bonnie and Chica, similarly torn, tattered, and with disturbing features, such as Bonnie having an exposed chest revealing his sharp metal endoskeleton, and Chica's cupcake, once just a fun prop in her hand, now fully aware and capable of moving on its own. To survive against the beasts that surround him, the young boy must fend himself from his demons till an alarm goes off at, you guessed it, 6 a.m. To do this, he must shine his light on the bed wherever he thinks the Freddles are swarming and plan to apparate Freddy. Simple enough task by itself. Making his life more difficult will be his adversaries flanking him from his east and west doors. The boy must rely on sound of Bonnie and Chica's springs and joints clashing as they stomp the ground and gears turning as they move. If they are merely just stalking him, he can scare them away with his light just like Freddy. But if they are right by his door, well, it's so dark he can barely see the door in front of him. And if he shines his flashlight and they are right there, they will pick him up by his shoulders and eat him on the spot. When that threat emerges, the boy must listen for the faint sound of life. Small, hoarse breaths of the monsters ready to pounce. If he hears them breathing, he must instead close the door on them, hold it shut, and pray they give up in their pursuit and try again later. These otherworldly creatures are referred to as nightmare animatronics officially, which may explain their uncanny appearance and inability to conform to reality and the basic laws of, well, physics. The dark scenario that is playing out is, in fact, all a dream being played out in the mind of a child. Well, less a dream and more dark, twisted nightmare to be more precise, one where the boy is hunted for sport by his subconscious fears. Once the boy holds a strong defense long enough, he will make it to 6 a.m., in which an alarm will go off, waking him out of his perpetual torment, leading us back to the daytime, leading us back to our crying child.
Four days until the party.
The crying child is still in his room, crying in a puddle of his own tears, but luckily his door is open. As he takes cautious steps outside his room, his golden Freddy plush tries to brace the young boy, warning him of the threats that may lie ahead.
You know he is hiding again.
As the boy leaves his confinement, so does his yellow plush bear, somehow shifting its location from his bed to atop a grandfather clock in the hallway. Or perhaps maybe there's just two of them? One on his bed and one on the grandfather's clock?
He won't stop until you find him.
The boy looks inside the adjacent bedroom, a girl's room, sparkled with pink sheets and floral decorations. The room is somehow in a state between clean and unkempt. The remains of a torn-up doll, which looks to be similar to that of the mangle, is lying on the ground creating an absolute mess, but the bedding of the sofa is nicely folded as if no one has been in here for ages. The only thing that has entered this room other than the crying child is a yellow Freddy plush who blinkers by the doorway.
Over there.
The yellow bear keeps warning the boy to be wary, his assuring words falling on deaf ears as hot tears still trail down the young boy's cheeks. The crying child moves into the household's living room, a quaint room with nothing more than a couch and a television within. As he tiptoes over to the television, he's taken aback by the sudden appearance of Foxy jumping out of the TV, giving a small growl as he leaps out of the shadows behind it. In an almost instinctual reaction, the boy crawls back into a ball and starts to cry. Now, in reality, Foxy isn't behind his TV. It's instead another child, a taller boy wearing a Foxy mask. Expanded upon, he is actually wearing the torn-off head of the crying child's Foxy plush. The threat that his imaginary friend was trying to warn him about was in actuality the older brother of the crying child, who, in the absence of any parental or authority figure in the house, seems to have free reign to torture his younger brother from day to night.
Tomorrow is another day.
Returning back to the warped reality of dreams, we find our child in an even worse state. The monsters that surround him seem to have ramped up their aggression, and every night it just keeps getting worse. they become more faster, more bold with their tactics to get inside. Even worse, Foxy has also infiltrated the dreamscape. Unlike the others, he acts a bit more crafty. Instead of going directly for the child, the monster fox makes a beeline towards the aforementioned closet in the bedroom. Playing with its food, Nightmare Foxy will attempt to jump the child while he's busy dealing with the other three. Now the young boy closed the door on him. Nightmare Foxy will shrivel away just like the rest of his bandmates. However, unlike the others who simply dissipate or supernaturally shift into a new position, Foxy instead, metamorphs into a completely harmless Foxy plush doll, meaning that the young child will have to keep returning to the closet door to reset Foxy's position throughout the night.
3 days until the party.
The crying child is no longer in the house, but still terrified and shivering with fear. He's inside a restaurant, hiding beneath a table, without any authority figure watching over him.
He left without you.
His imaginary friend's words echo in his head. While his stuffed bear isn't present, the young boy is surrounded by his face. The restaurant he lies in has his plush doll's face plastered all over, including a large poster of him smiling at guests entering the small restaurant. Wherever the crying child is, his golden plush seems to have come from here, as the mascot of the location.
He knows you hate it here.
The restaurant is decorated with celebratory streamers hanging from the ceiling and multicolored balloons attached to every table. What's obvious is that the child is in a Fazbear location, but why he was left here with no oversight is a mystery.
You are right beside the exit. If you run, you can make it.
As the young boy gets up, he starts to walk away from his table, inadvertently getting closer to the restaurant's main attraction, the show stage.
No. Don't you remember what you saw? The exit is the other way. Hurry and leave.
Quickly realizing his apparent error, he looks to the opposite direction to see the exit. He darts away with a sudden blossom of hope radiating from his chest, only to run into something soft yet hard. As he looks up to see what object impeded his progress, he sees a golden bear with purple accessories.
It's too late. Hurry the other way and find someone who can help.
In the middle of the golden bear's jaw and muzzle, between his white cartoon buck teeth, a pair of human eyes peek from inside.
You know what will happen if he catches you.
The young child abides by his guardian angel's words, fleeing from the yellow bipedal cartoon animal. The only option for his retreat was a path to the show stage in the back. Realizing where his path will lead caused him to slow down. Two shadows, one of a bear and the other a rabbit, bob up and down across the walls. The presence cascades over the crying boy.
You can find help if you get past them. You have to be strong.
The boy takes a few steps, cautious of what he must do. But the emergence of padded fabric rapidly approaching from his backside causes him to panic. The young boy crawls under a new table and returns to his previous position of sobbing out loud in a pool of his own tears.
Tomorrow is another day.
This is the narrative setup presented in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. You survive a night within a world of nightmarish purgatory to return to the perspective of a child being tormented by his home life and those around him. Albeit the home life is presented in an 8-bit Atari-esque graphic, but the story and emotional strings they pull are still prevalent and strong. After each 8-bit cutscene of the crying child in the daylight, before entering the main gameplay of the night, an optional minigame is presented to the player. Fun with Plush Trap. In this minigame, the player must rely once again on sound, as a small, uncanny version of the spring body animatronic, the same animatronic suit hybrid that would later impale and kill the purple guy, sits idly on a chair in a long hallway. When the lights are out, the mischievous imp gets off his chair and starts to make his way towards the player. To succeed, the player must get Plush Trap to stop on a designated X on the ground by shining a light when he is just above it. The catch being that, since you can't see him, you must rely on your sense of sound to detect when Plush Trap is close enough to the player. Too soon, and Plush Trap will either go idle or hide in one of the 4 rooms adjacent within the hallway. Too late, and Plush Trap will attack the player. The game is optional, but if the player succeeds, he'll be able to skip 2 hours of the night.
2 days until the party.
Back in the restaurant, the child is still holding his knees and his hands on the floor. Nobody seems to be in the building.
You have to get up.
The only exception to his isolation would be the imaginary voice in his head, and if he meanders for a little while in the restaurant, 2 more individuals. One being an ominous purple man in the shadows, helping an employee into a spring bonnie suit in an employees only room.
You can get out this time. But you have to hurry.
The crying child adheres to his guardian's words and quickly begins to escape the restaurant. As he begins to walk back home, he runs into other children. All of them seem to know him as either a friend or as a kid who is unnecessarily scared of the animatronic entertainers. One child, a young boy with a green shirt, even comments on how the crying child always has a Fredbear plush with him. The child with the green shirt carries a spring bonnie toy, but keeps getting his fingers pinched and snapped by it. He even says his father calls it a finger trap. Some children he passes by seem to be excited to see him, wanting to show him toy figurines of the animatronics that look strikingly similar to that of the toy animatronics. Another child, a stout boy who holds a balloon, asks if he is going to be in the party in a few days, before laughing as he recalls that he would obviously be going since the party was for the crying child. It was his birthday party. All the children are less kind to the boy, poking fun at his phobia and his infamous fear of the restaurant's characters. One girl with pigtails tells him a ghost story of how the animatronics come to life at night, and if you die, they will hide your body and you will never be seen again. Another openly laughs and mocks the fact that he hides under the table and cries his eye out, commenting on how nobody else is scared, so why was he so distraught? As the crying child scrambles to his house, from the corner of his eyes he was always watched by his yellow Freddy plush. He saw him stalking behind fences, lurking in sewer grates, or even as the head of a flower in a garden, further cementing that the boy is under constant psychological distress, or that something unworldly has happened to the boy, that he sees his guardian angel everywhere he goes. Eventually, the crying child does make it back to his house.
Be careful.
The crying child maneuvers to the TV. His brother is probably lying in wait to scare him again. The crying child turns the TV on. The cable box displays a program called Fredbear and Friends. As images flash by, we can see a copyright date by the cartoon's logo, 1983. After he enjoys the show and his brother doesn't show his presence, he gets enough confidence within him to go into his room. Perhaps he is not even here. That optimism was short-lived, as when the crying child walks into his room, his brother makes his grand appearance. From under his bed, he pops out and gives another scream, scaring the life out of his brother once again. Reactively, the younger brother wails and cries on the floor again.
Tomorrow is another day.
Something I have neglected to mention is that the nightmare world, sometimes the environment doesn't look the same. Not surprising, it's a dream after all, and I have previously detailed how the monsters that lurk within aren't even confining to the laws of physics or reality. But they're not the only things that fluctuate. On the nightstand next to the bed, objects occasionally appear, disappear, and then reappear on a whim. These objects include a flower, some alive, some wilting, in a purple vase. Another object is a prescription bottle with unknown medicine inside, and finally an IV drip, the kind you see in a hospital, leans against the wall next to the nightstand. The explanation for why these are here is never given.
One day until the party.
The crying child is locked in a room. He leans to the door on his knees, begging for someone to let him out. Behind him is a workstation, where lies torn off limbs and disrepaired spring-locked suits used at Freddy Fazbear restaurants. One suit even has its head completely torn from its body. Another doesn't even have its costume face, revealing the metal skull that lies underneath. The crying child begs, pleads for mercy, screaming for someone to please let him out. But once again crawling into a ball and whimpering one last hopeless please as he realizes that no one can hear him. And no one is going to let him out of that room.
Tomorrow is another day.
On the fifth night in the dreamscape, the young child trapped inside is faced with a surprise. There are no Freddles behind him, no fox in the closet, and as he looks down the hallway, he does not see Chica or Bonnie. Instead, something else lingers. A giant, torn-up bipedal bear, so tall that it has to duck down not to hit its head on the ceiling. It has vibrant purple accessories, namely a top hat and bow tie. It has two sets of razor-sharp teeth and viciously twisted fingers that look like knives. Its eyes burn a demonic red while its stomach cavity is torn open. The tears and white and purple buttons on its torso uncannily creating the illusion of a disturbing smile stretched across its stomach. Instinctively, the young child closes and holds the door shut. It worked in the other nightmares, why would this one be any different? He hears a loud, distant stomping, indicating that the creature was going away, only for those disturbing footsteps to replace with an echoing laughter coming from every wall and corner. The young child swirls around, shining his flashlight all around the room, finally landing his torch on his bed to find a decapitated head of a yellow bear staring at him. Lingers light on the smiling head looking down at him with a predatory glare in his eyes. The flashlight begins to blink on and off, small static being heard as it happens, and the head vanishes from sight, only for the boy to be attacked from a new, unpredictable angle. This is the scenario of Night 5, an infamous night on FNaF canon as is the first appearance of a boss level in Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. At no point in the night do the other nightmares come back, instead all being replaced with a penultimate demon known as Nightmare Fredbear, whose ensemble of the abilities of the others, teleporting to the hallway, bed, and closet, stalking the child at the perfect time to strike. The only way to survive is to hold out until the morning dawn, the victorious trumpets of an alarm clock.
Zero days until the party.
It's the crying child's birthday party today. It's the Fazbear location we had seen on previous cutscenes. including the young child crying. He is surrounded by 4 older boys, including his older brother, each one wearing a different Fazbear character mask. The one wearing a Chica mask comments on the crying child's behavior by saying, "Wow, your brother's a bit of a baby, isn't he?" The older brother responds by saying that he finds his brother's terrifying reaction as hilarious. No adult is seemingly around, not even the parents of the 2 brothers, and every other child is off playing elsewhere. They were effectively all alone. A nasty plot began to form in the back of the Foxy brothers' brain. Quote, "Why don't we help him get a closer look? He will love it." End quote. The younger brother begs for mercy, begs for anything other than that. But his older brother and his cronies pick him up so he can get, quote, "up close and personal," end quote. The younger brother shrieks and flails his arms around, reacting with a mixture of fear and ferocity. He was determined to not ever get near that stage. But it's a hopeless endeavor. And the bullies, unfortunately, they knew it. They taunt and tease him the whole time as they drag the younger child to the show stage, directly in front where a yellow Fredbear and a golden spring bonnie dance and sing for the entertainment of the guests. Suddenly, sensing an opportunity, the nasty prank evolved in the brother's head. Quote, "Hey guys, I think the little man says he wants to give Fredbear a big kiss." End quote. The bullies laugh as the older brother instructs them they will go on the count of 3. The older brother counts down and they hoist and shove the younger brother's head inside of Fredbear's jaw. They laugh maniacally as they watch the crying child thrash and wail for help, but to no avail. He was locked in too tight, he was stuck inside, so the only thing to do was to cry, to weep, and to... Fredbear's jaw locked up and closed down in a sharp, quick movement, crushing the young boy's skull in the process. The bullies stopped laughing. The bite victim stopped moving. And the entire restaurant went quiet.
There will be no tomorrow.
Within a black void, the bite victim is on his knees. In front of him, his Fredbear plush, and behind the yellow bear lies his friends, the plush toys that sat in the corner of his bedroom. Within the black void, you can hear his brother's words, but they are not ones of torments or malicious joy, but of sorrow and grief. He tells his brother, quote, "Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me. I am sorry." After a moment of silence from his brother's apologetic words, a new voice pipes up. The font is colored different from the usual Fredbear text, but the words and settings seem to indicate that someone is talking to him through his imaginary friend. It tells him, quote, "You're broken. We are still your friends. Do you still believe that? I'm still here." End quote. Every sentence that's spoken, one of the plushies behind him begins to fade in the darkness, leaving only the bite victim, Fredbear plush. His imaginary friend dissipates with the final words, "I will put you back together." The crying boy lowers his head. The soft pitch of a heart monitor flatlining rings in the background. And the bite victim begins to fade away as well, leaving nothing but utter. I think that's a good stopping point for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I know that I haven't gone over everything about the game. I still haven't talked about the 7th Night, the later edition of the game, which was updated with Nightmare Balloon Boy, and the infamous box that's plagued theorists for half a decade. But these will all be discussed in the next episode, which will be going over the various interpretations and theories that sprung from this game's release. Because while the events that I have unfolded are by no means not emotional, in the construct of an overall narrative of the previous 3 installments of the franchise, well, it's confusing, to say the least. So stay tuned for when our next episode will be released. If you'd like to stay updated on when new episodes are going to be released, please consider subscribing or following us, as well as sharing this podcast with others. It helps us broaden our reach and gets our show out to other people who may not know it exists. Consider following us on our Twitter at Fazbear Podcast, or using the link in the description below. I would also like to thank our current listeners and followers. As of when this episode is published, we have predicted that we will have over 1,000 downloads across all platforms, which is an incredible feat that we did not expect. We are very grateful for everyone who has enjoyed the podcast and can't wait to get more content out to you. Thank you so much for listening to the very end. Our thumbnail for this episode was done by the talented Jackson Goetti, whose Twitter is linked in the description below. And once again, I've been your host, Nick, and just thank you once again for listening. Have a good night.
Tomorrow is another day.